On the northern end of Amelia Island, Florida, about 40 miles up the coast from Jacksonville, there is a place where two Americas sit side by side, close enough to touch, and you can read the entire history of race and money in this country just by turning your head. On one side, gleaming multi-million-dollar resort homes, manicured golf greens, a Ritz-Carlton, the whole polished machinery of a luxury vacation destination, the kind of place where the wealthy come to be pampered by the ocean. And on the other side, feet away, a boarded-up nightclub with its windows gone, a condemned restaurant sagging and empty, weathered little cottages, some of them abandoned, a few of the grandest already torn down, a community of fewer than a couple of dozen year-round families clinging to about 40 acres of ground, a place that does not even appear on many maps of Florida. That boarded-up nightclub was once one of the hottest stages on the entire East Coast. That empty ground was once a paradise, a thriving, joyful, world-famous beach resort called American Beach, the crown jewel of black leisure in the American South. They called it the Negro Ocean Playground. It was built by the first black millionaire in the history of Florida. Zora Neale Hurston came here. Ray Charles played here. Cab Calloway, Joe Louis, Hank Aaron, Mary McLeod Bethune, they all came to this beach because for thousands of black families across the South, this was the one stretch of sand where they could feel the ocean without fear, and it was very nearly bulldozed into oblivion, its history erased under the golf courses and the resort mansions, except that one woman would not let that happen, a woman who had once been an opera singer in the concert halls of Europe, and who gave away her entire fortune and then went to live on this beach, sleeping on the sand with 7 feet of hair guarding a sand dune until the day she died. This is the story of American Beach. It is a story about a paradise built by a man who was born free in a family that had, the generation before, been born as property. And it is a story about how that paradise was destroyed by two things in the very same year. One of them, a hurricane, and the other one, freedom itself. To understand how all of that fits together, you have to start with the man whose faith built the whole thing, a man named Abraham Lincoln Lewis. His name tells you something about the world he was born into. Abraham Lincoln Lewis was, by the accounts of his own family, the first child in his family to be born after slavery, the first generation of freedom, named for the president who had signed the proclamation that freed his people. And freedom, for a black child in Florida in the years after the Civil War, did not mean ease. Lewis dropped out of school in the 6th grade to help support his family. He went to work at a sawmill in Jacksonville as a water boy, the lowest job there was, carrying water to the men doing the real labor. And from that water bucket, through sheer relentless drive, he climbed. He worked his way up until he became a foreman at that very mill. But Abraham Lincoln Lewis was not going to spend his life making another man rich. In 1901, he and a group of partners founded something audacious, the Afro-American Life Insurance Company in Jacksonville. It was, by many accounts, the first insurance company of any kind founded in the state of Florida, and it was created to do a specific and vital thing, to serve the black community, which was locked out of the white banks and the white insurers, which could not get a loan or a life insurance policy or a burial plan through any mainstream institution. Lewis built a company by and for black Floridians, and that company made him rich, Abraham Lincoln. Lewis became the first black millionaire in the history of the state of Florida. His granddaughter would later remember the values he drilled into the children of the family, what he called the 3 B's. The first B, he said, was the Bible. The second B was the school book, and the third B was the bank book: faith, education, and financial independence. He believed in education, one relative said, like the devil believes in sin. This was a man who had climbed from a water bucket to a fortune, and who understood in his bones that for a black community surrounded by a hostile white world, self-sufficiency was not a luxury, it was survival. And in 1935, Abraham Lincoln, Lewis decided to build his community one more thing it did not have and could not get anywhere else. He decided to build them a beach. To understand why a beach mattered so much, why it was worth a millionaire's fortune and a lifetime of a woman's devotion, you have to understand what the ocean meant to black Americans in the Jim Crow South, which is to say, you have to understand that it was denied to them almost entirely. Nearly every beach in the South was posted for whites only. And the reasons behind that were as ugly as anything in American history. Part of it was simple real estate greed, keeping black families off the sand, kept the property values up for white developers. But part of it was darker still. Beaches were places where people undressed, where bodies were exposed in swimsuits, and the white South was gripped by a violent obsession with keeping black men and boys away from the sight of white women and girls in bathing suits. A black man merely looking at a white woman on a beach could be and was accused, attacked, even lynched. The beach was one of the most dangerous racial frontiers in the entire segregated landscape. So for a black family in the South, the simple dream of taking the children to the ocean was, in practice, nearly impossible. And where it was possible at all, it came wrapped in the constant low dread of surveillance and humiliation and danger. And that is exactly the thing Abraham Lincoln Lewis set out to abolish on one stretch of Florida sand. He and his insurance company purchased beachfront property on Amelia Island, starting with a parcel of land and expanding over the following years to more than 200 acres. The land sat near the site of Franklintown, an old settlement founded by the formerly enslaved people of a nearby plantation and their descendants. On that ground, Lewis built a resort where black families could come and simply be, swim, sunbathe, dance, eat, sleep, exist by the ocean, without a single white eye scrutinizing them, without fear, without humiliation. The motto that came to define the place said it all. American Beach, they promised, was a place for recreation and relaxation without humiliation. And Lewis gave it a name that was itself a quiet act of defiance and hope. He did not call it Lewis Beach or Afro Beach or Colored Beach. He called it American Beach because he believed this man born on the far side of slavery, this man who had watched his country wall his people off from his own shoreline. He believed that in the United States of America, the beach should belong to everyone. The name was an argument. It was a claim on the country itself, American Beach, as if to say, this too is America, and we too are Americans, and the ocean is ours as much as anyone's. And for nearly 30 years, from 1935 to 1964, American Beach was glorious. It thrived on what the community called the 20 Sunday season, the roughly 20 summer Sundays between April and September when the beach came alive. And alive understates it. Black families came from Jacksonville, from Atlanta and Savannah, from hundreds of miles in every direction, many of them, driving all night to reach the one place they could relax by the sea. They bought cottages and built summer homes. They filled the hotels and the guest houses. The community had restaurants and shops, and most famously, its nightlife, a nightclub called Evans Rendezvous, and juke joints and dance halls that throbbed with music all summer long. Because American Beach, like Idlewild in Michigan and Carr's Beach in Maryland, became a jewel on the circuit of black entertainment. And the roll call of who performed and vacationed there is staggering. The folklorist and novelist Zora Neale Hurston came to American Beach. Ray Charles played here. Cab Calloway brought his orchestra. Billy Eckstein, Billy Daniels. The boxing champion Joe Louis came. The baseball legend Hank Aaron. The actor Ossie Davis. The great educator and activist Mary McLeod Bethune. This little stretch of Florida sand, built by an insurance man's fortune, became a place where the greatest figures in Black American life came to walk in the surf. The people who lived it describe a kind of freedom that is almost unbearable to hear about, precisely because of how small and how enormous it was at the same time. The freedom to lie on a beach, the freedom to let your children run in the waves, the freedom, as one guardian of the beach's memory would later put it, to relax with your family and have a good time without being scrutinized, questioned, and stared at. That was the gift Abraham Lincoln Lewis built, not just sand and salt water, but a rare and precious thing in Jim Crow America, a place where black people could let their guard all the way down. And in the founding year of that paradise, 1935, in a wealthy and prominent branch of the founder's own family, a baby girl was born. Her name was Marvine Elizabeth Betch, and she was Abraham Lincoln Lewis's great-granddaughter. Remember her because the beach and the girl were born in the same year, and their fates would turn out to be bound together for the rest of both their lives. Marvine grew up in privilege, the great-granddaughter of Florida's first black millionaire, and she grew up gifted. She had a magnificent voice. She trained as an opera singer, studied at the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, and went to Europe, where she performed on the concert stages of Germany for the better part of a decade. She was, by every measure, the golden child of a great black dynasty, launched into a glittering international career, a world away from a little beach on Amelia Island. And then, in 1964, the world that Beach lived in came apart in the span of a single year. Two blows, one right after the other, and between them, they killed American Beach. The first blow came out of the ocean. In September of 1964, Hurricane Dora made landfall in northeastern Florida, a rare and powerful storm, the kind that stretch of coast almost never sees. And Hurricane Dora hit American Beach hard. It tore through the community, destroying homes and businesses, ripping apart the structures that families had spent decades building. Many of the owners, when the storm had passed, found they either could not afford to rebuild or would not. The physical fabric of the paradise was gutted in a night, but the second blow of 1964 was the one that made the first one fatal, and it is one of the great aching ironies of the entire civil rights era. Because that same year, 1964, the Congress of the United States passed and the President signed the Civil Rights Act. And the Civil Rights Act outlawed segregation in public accommodations, and it desegregated the beaches of Florida and of the whole South. Every stretch of sand that had been posted for whites only was at last opened to everyone. It was a triumph. It was the very thing Abraham Lincoln Lewis had implicitly argued for when he named his beach American Beach, the belief that the shoreline of this country belonged to all its people. And it was, at the same time, the death sentence for the world he had built, because the entire reason American Beach existed was that black families had nowhere else to go. It was the answer to the wall. And when the wall came down, the answer was no longer needed. A black family in Jacksonville that had driven up to Amelia Island every summer because it was the only beach that would have them could now simply go to the beach down the road, the one that had turned them away the year before, and so they did. Why wouldn't they? After a lifetime of being fenced off from their own coast, of course they went to see all of it. The crowds thinned. The performers found bigger, integrated stages. The businesses that had roared all summer began to fall quiet. Hurricane Dora had smashed the buildings, and freedom had scattered the people. And between the two of them, American Beach began to die. Families sold their cottages or simply stopped coming. In 1991, even the great institution at the root of it all, the Afro-American Life Insurance Company, Abraham Lincoln Lewis's company, the engine that had built the whole thing, shut its doors for good after 90 years. And then the developers came for the corpse because American Beach sat on Amelia Island, and Amelia Island in the second half of the 20th century was being transformed into one of the premier luxury vacation destinations in the South, golf resorts, the Amelia Island Plantation, eventually a Ritz-Carlton, millions and millions of dollars in high-end development pressing in on all sides. And the emptying, aging, shrinking Black Beach town was suddenly sitting on some of the most valuable oceanfront real estate in Florida. The land began to sell. Grand old homes were torn down. And in one especially painful blow, a large section of American Beach's property, segregated, including the giant sand dune that towered over the whole community, the tallest dune system in all of Florida, was sold to the Amelia Island Plantation Resort. The paradise was being carved up and swallowed by the very kind of luxury development that its founder had built it to escape. American Beach shrank from a 200-acre dream to a 40-acre remnant of boarded-up buildings, standing in the shadow of resort mansions, fading toward the day when it might disappear from the map entirely, which is exactly when the opera singer came home. Because Mavune Naibetch, the great-granddaughter born the same year as the beach, had walked away from her singing career and returned to Florida, and by 1977 she had come back to American Beach, drawn by the place her great-grandfather had built and by the natural world around it. And what she did next is one of the most extraordinary acts of devotion you will ever hear. She gave it all away. Her entire inheritance, the fortune passed down from Florida's first black millionaire, hundreds of thousands of dollars, Mavene Betch gave away to some 60 environmental and social causes. She sold the family home and donated the money, and then, having divested herself of nearly everything she owned, she went to live on the beach, not in a mansion, not even in a house. For years she had no home at all. She slept on a chaise longue on the sand. She stayed in a donated trailer or in the borrowed basement rooms of friends. She lived, willfully and joyfully, as close to the ocean and the dune as a human being could get. And she became, physically unmistakable, a living monument. She was 6 feet tall, and she let her hair grow into dreadlocks that reached some 7 feet in length, and she let her fingernails grow long and curling. And she draped herself in jewelry she made from shells and beach stones in bright colors. She was impossible to miss and impossible to forget, and everyone up and down the coast came to know her by a single name, the Beach Lady. Even her name became a work of art and protest. She had been born Marvine. She changed it to Mavine, adding an extra E, she explained, to honor the environment. And she dropped the R from her name entirely because, and this is the detail that tells you everything about her, as a trained singer, she was attuned to sound and vibration. And she did not want to carry the same sound vibration as President Ronald Reagan, whose environmental policies she despised. She took a new middle name, Osun, after the Yoruba goddess of femininity and the arts. She left an outgoing message on her answering machine that went, "This is the Beach Lady. If you're getting this message, it may be because I have turned into a butterfly and floated out over the sand dune." And that sand dune was her great cause. She named it Nana. It was the tallest dune in Florida, and it was the piece of American beach that the developers wanted, and Mavene Betch made herself its guardian. She fought the sale and the development with everything she had. She gave historical tours of American Beach to busloads of students, teaching them what the place had been, keeping the memory alive with her booming, cultured, operatic voice. She planted trees. She protected the threatened gopher tortoises that lived in the sand, admonishing her own neighbors for mowing lawns the tortoises needed to forage. She posted signs on Nana warning, "Danger, snakes!" Not because there were snakes, but to keep people from climbing and damaging her beloved dune. She aggravated county officials and developers and neighbors alike relentlessly, brilliantly for decades in defense of one sand dune and one black beach. And she won because of Mavine Betch's fight. Nana Dune was ultimately protected. It is today owned by the National Park Service and preserved as part of the Timucuan Ecological and Historic Preserve, safe forever from the bulldozers. The tallest dune in Florida, the one she said she would flutter over as a butterfly, still stands because one woman gave up an opera career and a fortune to save it. Mavune Betch died of cancer in 2005. She did not live to see her greatest dream fulfilled. But her sister, and here the story reveals just how remarkable this family was, her sister was Dr. Johnetta Betch Cole, the celebrated educator who became the first black woman president of Spelman College and who worked alongside Mavine to preserve their great-grandfather's legacy. And in 2014, 9 years after the beach lady's death, the dream she had carried her whole life finally came true. The American Beach Museum, the A.L. Lewis Museum, opened its doors, telling the story of the Negro Ocean Playground and the millionaire who built it and the community that flourished there. American Beach's historic district had already been placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2002. The place would not be erased after all. So how do you weigh a story like this? You do it the way we have learned to, standing on the sand at American Beach, holding two true things at once. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the very law that emptied American Beach, was one of the greatest achievements in the history of this country. It tore down the whites-only signs on every beach in the South and made real at long last the exact idea that Abraham Lincoln Lewis had built into the name of his resort, that in America the ocean belongs to everyone. You cannot mourn that. You can only be grateful for it. And yet in the winning of that freedom, a magnificent world was lost, a world of black ownership and black joy and black safety, a paradise built by a formerly enslaved family's descendant on 200 acres of Florida shoreline, most of it now carved up beneath the golf courses and the mansions of a luxury resort. Both of those things are true. Freedom was worth everything, and the loss was real. But walk that beach today, and it is not only a graveyard, because the boarded-up shell of Evans Rendezvous still stands stubbornly, feet from the multi-million-dollar homes, a ghost refusing to be evicted. A small band of multi-generational families held on to their cottages through all of it and are still there. The museum stands now telling the story to anyone who will come and listen. And above it all, the great Dune Nana still rises, the tallest in Florida, protected forever, exactly as the beach lady demanded, with the wind moving over the sea oats, where she once slept on a beach chair and dreamed of turning into a butterfly. Abraham Lincoln Lewis, born free into a family that had been born enslaved, built a beach and gave it the most audacious name he could think of. He called it American Beach, a claim, a hope, an argument that this country would one day belong to all of its children equally. He did not live to see the wall come down. His great-granddaughter gave away everything she had and slept on the sand to make sure that when it did, the memory of what they had built in the meantime would not vanish under someone else's swimming pool. The paradise faded, freedom scattered its people, and a hurricane took its buildings, and money came for its land. But the dune still stands. The name still stands, the most American name a beach could have, and somewhere over the sea oats of Nana, if you believe the beach lady, a butterfly is still keeping watch.